today we have a very special episode. Now, some of us, you might notice our voices are a little bit different, a little bit of a cold here, but it was so important that we wanted to have this discussion that we did not want to wait for a potential other opportunity. And we have Rhiannon here, Rhiannon Wild, the founder of the of the International Tantric Sexology School in Denmark, as well as in Sweden. And this is just a really important episode because we're going to be talking about the dark side of sexual wellness, what that means, why it's important to be informed about this. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, what is a sexology school, what's being taught there, all things sex, is it crazy, is it normal? And we are going to also going into like what kind of stuff in the second part of the episode to be looking out for and things to be aware of when going into the sexual wellness industry, because a lot of times it can look very entertaining and interesting from the outside, but as people start to explore this, it's something that's very important. I know this has been near and dear to your heart, so thank you for coming on and being here with us.
And I really, I'm excited. I only just met you in the last few years and just really love your message and your mission, and Rhiannon is definitely a wild spokesperson, which I really love.
That name.
And that's her last name, which I think is fantastic. But I love your edginess, but what I love is your devotion. Your devotion to impeccability, your devotion to truth, and your devotion primarily also to the client experience, so that people are actually genuinely accessing their erotic intelligence, genuinely healing and genuinely experiencing the beautiful side of what pleasure can be.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I just want to say that we're really speaking to both the client but also professionals in this one. I think it's when we talk about the sexual wellness industry, it's both aspects, your personal process going in from that perspective, but also from your professional if you want to educate yourself in the field. And yeah, I'm just so excited to be here and to share this conversation with you guys, because we've had some talks and there's just a lot of fire and truth that wants to come through. So let's bring it in.
Well, let's start off with that then. What is a sexology education, and why did you decide to start a school? That's no small endeavor.
No. So actually, I've started off educating people professionally in something called de-armoring. And built on that came the tantric sexologist education. And the initiation for both of them really came from experiencing the dark shadow in this realm of work. And I went to Tantra school where I experienced, both on a personal level, to have incredible openings into, my own body, to, expanded states of consciousness and deepening my own pleasure and aliveness in my body. But I also experienced really, just brutal stuff. What happens when things are not facilitated in a way that is deeply trauma informed, that is deeply slow, that is deeply in tune with the somatics of the body. And coming from being trained as a essence somatic based psychotherapist, it was a lot to hold, both like experiencing all the expansion and the excitement of that, and also experiencing the brutalness of what happens when things are not facilitated in a trauma-informed way. And so that actually, combined with experiencing my own deep trauma, being my deepest trauma, being re-traumatized in that setting, it actually brought me to the fucking edge. And I didn't want to live anymore. Like, that was as far as I was out, because it really, I had opened so much myself. Like I've really opened to the deepest parts of my being. And then, yeah, with my partner at that time, I was just, and with betrayal, I was just deeply re-traumatized. And looking back at that now, I'm of course like so fucking grateful. But at that time, like I was really on the edge. And I decided to let go of all my stuff. I traveled to the other side of the world and I really went deep into actually figuring out, okay, so how do I rewire this pattern? How do I rewire this trauma? How do I rewire this in my nervous system so that I make sure that this is never going to happen again? And from that, I get goosebumps speaking about this, because from that, so much creation and so many things was built off of that. So if I go back to your question, with the academy that we have today, it is really rooted in this deeply trauma-informed approach. It is deeply holistic. It is deeply weaving multiple truths at the same time, like both the ancient wisdom, the science, the embodiment experience, the embodied experience, the whole professional framework, all of these like different components for people to feel, okay, there are multiple truths here and all of these things, the psychosomatics, all these things. And what is it that I can use? What is it that fits on my timeline? What is it that I want to use professionally? And I find that really works for people, instead of being an academy that says, okay, this is the truth and this is how you're going to do it.
So you're teaching from a deeply embodied place, and in that way you're also allowing others to navigate like what's embodiment for them and how does the information land through their own perspective, so they can bring that back not as a Rhiannon bot, but as their own sovereign person who's well informed and well educated.
And I think that's in my reality a part of being trauma informed. It is to actually do everything we can as facilitators to say, how can I bring people into their deepest power? Because every single person on this planet have a different timeline. They have a different somatic language in their body, the way the brain, the neuroplasticity is wired. So what is it that I need on a personal level, but also what is it that is really aligned for me from a professional perspective, and to not just take on teachings, but actually be embodied from where am I at on my timeline.
Just for the sake of clarity, why don't we just answer like, what do you mean by embodied, so that if the listeners, this is the first time they've ever heard any of this, and they're super curious perhaps to explore both maybe personally, maybe professionally, like something around sexuality. Why is embodiment so important, and what do you mean by embodiment?
So my way of looking at embodiment is that we have, our biology has different responses to survive. It's genius. It helps us as a animal, but also as a human, where we are in need of our connection and our parents. It helps us to survive. The challenge for us as humans is that we are dependent on our parents' love, right? So we can develop where we go away from our own gut, our own authenticity, our own needs and desires, and the biology creates a response that can be freeze, that can be fight, that can be flight, that can be fawn. And then from that response, in order to get love, or also because if you experience the trauma, whatever, you actually create a wiring in your nervous system and in the brain. That then creates a protection mechanism that makes you then act in a certain way. And so for me, embodiment is actually coming back to, so what is actually my authentic voice beyond my response? What is actually my intuition, my soul's calling? What am I really desiring or longing for? Like all the things that are deeply authentic to me beyond my response. So my work is a lot about helping people rewire and decondition these types of defenses or responses that are created from safety to create safety and protection. And then of course, on the top layer of that are a lot of personal patterns that is coming from like a response and maybe a trauma that is actually not, the full truth of who we are.
Yeah.
So embodiment for me is to anchor into that wholeness that I feel, okay, here I am, here's my truth, and I'm working on living from there. Yeah. So, yeah.
When you mentioned about some of these experiences that you opened and then contracted, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what does it mean to be open? Like, what's an experience that someone could relate to?
Yeah, so on my own journey then I would use the word de-armoring, meaning opening, rewiring my nervous system to come into rest, digest, fully safety, opening up the fascia, opening up, and especially when I've had my whole pelvic floor opened, and especially the cervix, then I've had these incredible experiences of actually feeling like my soul, my wisdom getting more space in my physical being. And I get really touched when I tune into this, because that has been significant moments in my life of like a trajectory, or just going like, okay, when I feel this embodiment in my body, and not just thinking about my soul or visualizing, but I fucking feel like that I am the earth, that I am the universe, or feeling like here my essence is, this is who I am, but on all the layers, I have been able to move in life in a completely different way. Like I've been able to make decisions, I've been able to take leadership from that place, feeling that safety in myself. I've been really also experiencing, like people speak about synchronicity or flow, or things become easier. Like, because you don't react from a response so much maybe anymore, and your nervous system is more calm, and you're able to feel, okay, I'm now being guided and pulled in this direction intuitively. It's not something I have to plan or to think about. It's my body kind of having sex with life in a way, or moving like in that deeply pleasurable way. So
it's kind of like you can hear the music of life, and so then you stay in synchronicity with it, you stay in tune with it. Now, you mentioned both with de-armoring and how this has opened you, and so I imagine this has then also helped for clients. Now, how would you then say that this plays a role for those who are professionals going into this field? The importance of embodiment.
Yeah. So when we are working with clients as professionals, I think it's so important to really understand the complexity of that, to be able to recognize when am I out of my capacity to actually work with this client, because I've asked questions that maybe determine that this client is on specific medication, or there are just so many things and levels of awareness of like being able to tune into people's timeline, to people's current life situation. What are they actually in capacity of working with right now in their, because one thing is to have sessions with clients and work with something, but the integration phase is so incredibly important. Like that's even more important than the actual session where you do some really deep work. So there is the attunement to where they're at in their life, what is, you know, what is their capacity. There is the whole intake and then how you, in the session with the client, how is your own nervous system? How is your own relaxation? How are you able to frame and hold the space in a way where a client can really go really deep? So I don't know if that's the full answer, but there are just so many components to actually working with clients. And I think when we speak about the dark shadow of the sexual wellness industry, it is that a lot of people go out and they have incredible experiences. And
such as like best orgasm of their life, or
exactly.
I feel like they've almost
Cosmic
like a psychedelic
union.
experience.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing. It's incredible. People should definitely have that. But it's not the same thing as then being able to say, okay, I can share this with the world and I can start attracting people and working with clients, helping them with the same thing. Like that is just so important to differentiate, that it takes years and years of training to actually be able to working with clients.
It reminds me a bit of if it's, you know, you're really your first time ever flying. Going on a flight, you have this amazing experience and the flight attendants are nice and you get to this place much faster than driving. You're like, oh my gosh, this is the way to travel. And then the next day you're like, well, I'm going to start flying, you know, airline jets and get right into it without any training whatsoever, just because you had this amazing flight. And you're like, now you think you can actually fly an airplane and know everything about flying and what's involved. It's like scuba diving. I see it in beginner divers. They'll have an ecstatic experience and then they just think like they know everything what they don't know. Because when you start to actually learn an art deeply, you usually learn all the things that can go wrong. The beginners, they get the shiny, happy moment, right? But underneath all that, you have to learn, like, these are all the ways that things, you know, might go sideways, and how do you handle them effectively? And so you can always tell someone who's not trained because they're in the little starlight moment of how awesome everything is and completely insensitive to the space or the people in the space or even to themselves, actually.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a really important distinction because you have people that are, I would call explorers. And these are people who are looking into this or kind of discovering this themselves. It's sort of, I feel like most psychology students start off because they're trying to figure themselves out. So at that point, you know, they're starting to explore. They're getting an idea of what's going on. And then maybe they would go to a school and then down like many years of training later, they become a psychologist. In this field, I meet people that are exploring themselves, they have an experience, and I think they should completely go out there and share it. But what I will often see is they'll say, oh, I have 18 years of experience, and that just means, oh, this is when you first started late in your life that you discovered something about yourself. And then they start saying that their path of discovery is actually the experience that they have professionally. And often they're not able to distinguish between helping people have their experience or just telling people about their experience and the understanding that other people have different experiences and the path that they might go through to get where they're at or the blocks they might be coming up with don't always relate back to that explorer place. So you need to be able to take the position of having worked with many different clients. And this was one of the things that, the reason why, you know, when you were like, Aaron, can you teach at my school? I love about your school is this emphasis on embodiment. Because if I were to look at, I mean, this is actually how the conversation started. I called you up and I said, all these curriculums in sexology, they look really similar. They talk only about kind of identity, selling yourself as a sex coach, lubes and vibrators.
And the politics. Yeah.
And it seemed very rather political, but there was nothing about how to feel. and so, and then we go back quite a ways with de-armoring, which for those of you that don't know, it's using the breath, the voice, movement, and touch to really start to remove tension from the body that doesn't just change the tension in the body, but also in the psychology. And so when I was asking you, like, well, what is it that all these curriculums seem like they're kind of out of the same thing? What do the schools in Denmark have? Because there's, I think Aalborg has a sexology degree. And I said, well, what are the CVs, not the CVs, but what's the curriculum course load that they have? And how does this distinguish from yours? And then you took a look into it and you were just like, well, first of all, there's no like original source material. It's just kind of like textbooks of people writing different things that were based off of others. So, and then eventually you're like, but the most important thing was that there didn't seem to be any practices getting the practitioners in touch with their body, which then ends up meaning that everything kind of becomes prescriptive. And so what would you say about the people that graduate from your school when they get this? Do you really emphasize that people have an experience in their body, so that way then they are able to have these multiple experiences to relate to multiple types of clients and not just from a heady space?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. I think one of the most important things that differentiates is that we are really working to educate our people to be embodied in how do I help clients at a root level and just not with symptom treatment. Because a lot of things that I see in the sexual educational space is a lot of symptom treatment, actually.
More lube.
More lube, more dildos, do this sex position like in more porn way or whatever, like, and it's actually not creating evolution, in my opinion. And we have this incredible possibility with this work to actually shift the course of humanity. It's that big.
Agreed.
And I get goosebumps with you guys sitting here because this is the fucking potential that we have. But in order to do that, we as, de-armoring practitioners or professionals and sexologists, we have the opportunity to actually go to the root of the things. Because people come with deeply sensitive, complex things. And so instead of having people, do more talking things, it's like, okay, so what is the body actually telling? What is the somatics telling? Why is it that you don't feel safe right now in your relationship? What is the tension? What is the holding there? Is that something in your own timeline from your childhood that you're bringing into your current relationship? Or is it actually because there is a dynamic between you guys that maybe has to do with different, you're fixated in maybe a different sexual tendency or whatever it is, and then we give them the embodiment and the tools to actually be able to work with clients on a root level. And yes, that's one component. And just your question again, I lost the track.
Well, I mean, you were answering it though, just about how what are some of the things that you notice your students are able to do, which is what you're speaking of. And I guess let me direct this because I want to leave people with something before we switch over to the members part of the podcast.
It's going to be juicy.
Oh yeah.
Conversation.
Well, we're going to get into some stories, and this is a big one, of being trauma informed and some maybe personal stories of where things have gone off the rails when they aren't. But just for everybody, because I do really think this work is so important for everyone. I want to make sure that our free listeners also get this. What would you say are some things that they should look at if they are, either if you call yourself a professional or if you are seeking out a professional and like you go, hey, you know, Rand and I have this issue going on. I want you I can't have orgasms. I want you to help me. Like, what is the process that a person can truly understand that this is a safe and good practitioner? What are some guidelines that a person should be able to kind of check on if they were, or you could also do it by stating what are some red flags to avoid and what are the good things to be looking for?
Yeah, so there are quite a few things, because I think it's important to say that just because someone is educated and has a certificate, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily trauma informed.
And not everyone graduates first from the class.
And just because you've done a lot of embodiment stuff doesn't mean that you're necessarily trauma informed. I think what is really important to look out for is, how is the intake? Like, what are the questions you're being asked? How thorough are they? And how well is the professional listening to what you're actually coming with? Are they able to tune into your unique timeline and get out of this like advices and stuff, but really tune in, who are you? What are you coming with? And helping you. Do you feel safe? Do you feel deeply safe in your nervous system? If you have this gut feeling, here's something that feels a little bit off. I feel maybe, you know, like, is he hitting on me, or is there leaky energy, or like just some of that. It's just like a no. Like, if you go into professional session, it has to feel deeply professional. However, if you don't feel that there is empathy and connection, it's also a little bit of a red flag, because we can actually not go into deep trauma rewiring if there is not a human empathic heart at place. So that's where I see that a lot of the professional stuff is in a way lacking or overriding the depth of what's possible, because we experience trauma in relating. So in order to actually drop the nervous system into a healing capacity, there needs to be some connection and trust and relating there without it becoming too personal.
Yes.
And then the last thing that's really important, it is, do you feel you leave that session deeply relaxed, deeply like, or not maybe relaxed, but like there is a resolution of some sort? And do you feel like, okay, there is actually an integration process here that has been framed and that is being taken care of? Can I reach out to the person? Can I what is the support system here? What is the framing that I have bought into?
So you can take your learning and experience into everyday life.
Because exactly, especially when you work with wanting to rewire stuff at a deep level, there needs to be some sort of integration support, because that's where the real life comes in, and it's a challenge for a lot of people here to actually, okay, so I've just let go of a lifelong defense mechanism, and how do I, when I come home to my partner, how do I actually work with integrating this with that person? So I think it's important that the professional is aware of that complexity there. And it's maybe sounds like a lot of things, but when this is in place, we are able to go to the root of rewiring, and we are able to actually change the course of your lineage, your family lineage. We're able to cut the course of what has been, and we're able to actually go on a new evolutionary path in your family timeline, in your little community, and on a larger scale. And that's what gives me the fucking goosebumps and turns me on. Like, I am here for evolving consciousness, and in my opinion, it has to happen through embodiment.
I just wanted to clarify. So first level would be at least someone who's educated, because yes, you just don't want a stranger who went to one Burning Man event and now they're teaching or saying I can do your de-armoring. So some form of
About
education.
one online course or something like that.
And look into that education. Just make sure it's a quality education. However, even if they are educated, if they don't have a sense of their own humanity, their understanding of how the limbic system works, meaning connection,
nervous system, that they are able to, no matter what response you come with, anger, sadness, whatever expression wants to move through your body, that there is capacity to
essentially just an embodied practitioner, which there are not a lot of. So, but I think that's what you're leaning towards is if they have the credentials, are they embodied? And because that's, I think, the new discerning factor. At least for me, it is. There's just not, even in like natural, like in medicine, there's a lot of a lot of doctors, but there are not a lot of doctors who actually connect with you and work with you and listen to you. Rather than just any kind of rote prescription. And I think the more our leaders in any avenue of life have embodiment, the more we actually serve humanity itself and not just our own paycheck.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say too that in addition to having their own embodiment, they should have a track record of helping other people come into embodiment. And when you are asking a person to help you with something, they should be able to figure out, like, well, where are your boundaries? What is it you're wanting to achieve? How can I adapt the way that I help you to fit within the needs that you have, as opposed to just saying, well, this is the experience I have, this is how everyone does it, and this is how you're going to do it. And as opposed to actually like working with this kind of co-creative process that happens with you, as opposed to just kind of throwing XYZ at you like a bunch of pills and saying, this is how you're going to do that.
Well, let's jump in, because I really want to hear some stories, like real stories of material things that have happened in your path, things that you've seen, what not to do. Because I've learned most of my stuff is by witnessing what not to do. I'm like, wow. Exactly. And I, like, a huge amount of my training in life is the type of teacher that showed me exactly what not to do. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear some stories, your honest opinion about those experiences, and then like what would help shift the needle, move that needle forward.
To join us for the complete and explicit version of the podcast, simply upgrade your membership and gain instant access.